There are many judges here today, but we've got Ryan Lanteigne, who is actually not only a judge, but full-time dude. You are a judge in real life for drift racing. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Susie put you on the spot. You've seen over 100 some odd cars.
Yeah, 150.
And we're not able to say what his favorite is.
No, we can't.
We can't.
I'm judging a different category this
what
round.
category?
So I'm doing the Rookie of the Year this year. My portion's pretty small. Out of the 150 cars, maybe 30, 35 cars, something like that I was judging. So I'm not doing an overall best of show or anything like that. I was simply judging anybody under the 25 years of age that has a car here.
You kind of segued into the whole arena of judging for Formula Drift. How did that all happen?
Well, I used to drive in Canada. Drove for a couple of years. I competed up there. I lost my sponsor, BF Goodrich, in the end of 2009. So in 2010, I decided, well, I didn't decide. They asked me to judge the Canadian series. They said, you're here, you might as well be involved. We need the judge. So I judged 1 year up there. One of the FD judges was coming up there to help us out. And he knew that in 2011, Formula Drift needed a new judge. So I came down and interviewed, and I got the job in 2011, and I've been doing it since.
That's awesome. Yeah. And if we go back to sort of the history of drifting out of Japan, I take it Formula Drift in Japan is probably one of your highlights, to be able to go out there and judge those series out there.
Yeah, it really is. Formula Drift Japan is one that's been around for a few years now, 4 years, I believe, 5 years. And the opportunity to go out there so many times in a year, see the culture, the tracks. I was able to buy a car and just leave it at the racetrack there as well. So I've done that a couple of times, and I get to go drift myself on legendary tracks in Japan and just live the ultimate dream when it comes to drifting in that sense.
You started in the early years. Did you ever realize that this would be something that progressed as it is today? Talk to us on that a little bit.
I never imagined I'd be where I am today. I just did it because I loved it back then. My friend was involved, he got me involved. And then when I started competing, I just loved I love being sideways in a car. I don't know what it is. When I was a kid, you know those big mats? It looks like the outline of a city, kind of a drawing overhead of a city, and kids can play with their little Hot Wheels. I had one of those, but mine had rubber drawn all over it, and I used to pretend I was drifting my Hot Wheels around it. I wish I still had it, but my parents got rid of it years ago. So that started me really young in that kind of mentality.
So you're saying while everyone else up in Canada was probably doing hockey and some other things, you're like, no, I want to drift.
Cars.
What is this?
Yeah,
cars.
Exactly. And it's to this day, people say, oh, what's your favorite hockey team? I don't know much about hockey. I'm one of the few Canadians that don't really follow hockey that much. But yeah, drifting just kind of, it became a sport in North America, and it's almost like it was something that developed as I came into the age that I could start participating in something like that, and it was the perfect timing for me. It was just ideal.
So here you are, you're getting started, you're out. We ask a lot of our drivers that come on the show, whether they're NHRA, NASCAR, Formula One. We just had Derek Daly on, and a few others, and you get so overwhelmed at times, and it's not like you can practice that track day in and day out. Where do you take your mind as someone behind the wheel, getting ready for an event? Take us where you're going behind the wheel. How do you prepare for that?
That was always the toughest part for me, the mental side of it. The mechanics, the crew could have the car ready and everything, but getting yourself in the right state of mind is the most challenging part. You have to be aggressive. You have to be really dialed in terms of knowing what your car can do and how to make it do what you need it to do. But you need to be that level of aggressive with a level of control and self-control where you're not going to overdrive the car and crash, right, or make contact with the other car. And that's what truly makes a champion out there, is somebody that can focus enough while being aggressive enough to win, right? Some of the people are not aggressive enough, so they end up dropping out early in competition because they're not pushing themselves hard enough.
Sure.
But then there are the ones that push too hard and end up overdriving the car, crashing, making contact with the other car, whatever it might be, spinning out. And it's the ones that can truly focus. For me, I was never really great at that aspect of it. The competitive side was never something I was never that driver that had the killer instinct. I love driving and I love being out there, but I didn't have the killer instinct. So
you got to a point where you had to make that decision,
right? It didn't make sense for me to continue anymore. But like I say, the guys that really make it are those ones that can focus on all those things at the same time. And the guys in our series that are doing well: James Dean, Frederick Osbo, Vaughn Gittin Jr., Ryan Turek. I can go on and on with names, but the ones that are truly at the top are the ones that can focus in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
As a driver many years ago, and of course sort of segueing into judging, doing an amazing job covering the circuit, what do you see that's a commonality amongst drivers and the mechanics of their vehicle? What is the common, shoot, this thing broke again? What are folks having a tough time with? Is it tires? Is it horse? Is it the engine power plant? Is it body that just gets demolished in a bad crash and they just don't have that ability to come back? What's the commonality of what one could really jack up badly and set them back really good?
Right now in Formula Drift, it's a very unique situation that we have in our sport, especially in North America. In Japan, the horsepower levels tend to be a little more controlled. US, you know how it is in America, we like everything big and fast.
Yeah, we do.
And we essentially, the drivers in our series right now, the common statement about them is 9-second drag cars, but sideways. The cars are generally 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower, somewhere around there. Some are even more, 1,200, 1,100 horsepower. So trying to make a car last in the heat when you're clutch kicking and being on throttle so aggressively with the grip that these cars produce, you're going to break things. The engines are blowing up all the time. Absolutely. Guys are blowing their engines because the engines are developed to the absolute bleeding edge of what they're able to get out of those engines. Transmissions, differentials, axles, all of those, anything from the engine back, any part of the driveline that's going to be taking a shock,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much grip. Some of these cars are lifting the inside front wheel while they're going around the corner, you know? There's so much grip being created by those rear wheels, by the rear tires, that the engines have to work really hard. The misconception about drifting is no grip, right? People think that you're running around on bald tires or really, really hard plasticky tires that you'll slide around easily, and that's not the case at all. These cars are incredibly gripped up with the tires that they have, and they're capable of doing things that we never really thought possible, 10 years ago.
And they're pushing the threshold. I mean, I imagine 5 years from now what it'll be like. And as a judge, what do you see that can be tough in actually judging these events? I know there are rules, there are sort of regulations, there's the vehicle checks and so on. What challenges do you have? I mean, do you ever call a race or call a session of a race, however that works, and feel like, was that a good call? Or
sometimes it's tough. We are getting to the point now with the level of drivers that we have in our series, especially Formula Drift, where it's a field of 32 cars that'll go out in a top 32 bracket. And I've been talking about this for the last couple of years now, especially with some drivers where maybe 3-4 years ago in the top 32 portion of the battle, you could say, I'm pretty sure this driver is going to win in this battle. I'm not 100% sure, but based on qualifying, based on experience, based on their history, based on everything that I've seen between this driver and that driver, because at the beginning,
is it like calling a Mike Tyson fight sometimes? Like Mike Tyson's in there, okay, he's gonna. I mean, that's going way back. But
sometimes, yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Because in the way that our bracket's built, the first place qualifier goes up against the 32nd place qualifier. So unless somebody really good made a mistake and ended up in top 32, generally our 32nd qualified driver is one that earned their 32nd spot. So if you're putting first against 32nd, generally you're going to say, well, the first place guy has all the chance in the world of winning this. That's not the case anymore. It is so tight now in competition.
It's good
for the last
sport.
2 to 3 years. Yeah,
it's good for the sport.
You can't predict anything. It wasn't my job to predict, but you're hearing this from a lot of people. It's so unpredictable now.
Is that the attraction for a lot of folks that are not just youngsters in general, but folks that are looking to take it to those next levels, that, hey, you know what, there's a sport that I truly have an opportunity with? Yeah,
that's one of the big things about drifting is you don't have to be a millionaire to get into drifting. A lot of people say drifting's getting to that point now, and like any motorsport, it's going to get to that point. You look at NASCAR, Formula 1, IndyCar, they've been around for a lot of years. They've already gone through that climb to the point where it's prohibitively expensive. Drifting is getting there slowly. It's slowly edging up, but at the moment you can still get into if you look at Andrew Schulte's car over there, it's a 240SX. It's got, I believe, a V8 or 2G. I'm not sure what he has in his car, but you can put an engine like that in, and for $40,000, $50,000, you can have a very competitive car at the Pro 2 level, and you can get out there with some of the top drivers in the world and go head to head. Where else can you do that in competitive motorsports?
Absolutely. And in fact, we've watched Andrew progress over the years. Susie, he's been on the show before. 19 was an incredible year for him. And it does speak to a lot of the younger teams or drivers. In this case, drivers. I mean, you know, what I've heard is the mantra of, we're getting together. It's a bunch of buddies, and we're just gonna have it in our garage. And you know, not to take away from how NHRA started or NASCAR started. This is sort of a reinvention. But yes, they're like, do you expect me to come up with $1 million a year budget conservatively to run down a quarter-mile track? This is an opportunity.
It really is, and people are really capturing that right now, especially at the Pro 2 level. It's a top 16 competition, and generally we have around 40 drivers that are competing to get into, you know, trying to qualify for the 16 spots. So we have a lot of people interested. We have, every year, more and more people, different people from different motorsports, that, you know, different disciplines that you wouldn't have necessarily expected in the past to come in are starting to get interested in it because of the competitive nature. It's really quick out on the track. It's not like you have to sit and watch a 3-hour race or a 2-hour race. It's 30 seconds per battle, and you're getting fireworks at a level that you sometimes don't get at other motorsport events in that 30 seconds it's really exciting. You don't know what's going to happen, and there's crashes and, you know, everything that happens.
There's a lot of dynamic to that. It sort of reminds me what Alden Ferris said. It's not 30 seconds. I think lately it's less than 4 seconds for sure. And that's NHRA. And NHRA still has that ability to where you can go pit side, you can go and meet the drivers and so on. Do you find that the fans really dig that as well? They can sit down and really observe and get close and perhaps, you know, see a Vaughn Gittin or see a Schulte up and coming or fielding. You know, fans love the approachability of the sport.
It's the number one thing for fans, I believe, around the world. And all the different series I've judged internationally, different places, the fans will approach the drivers in a different way. In Japan, everybody is very respectful, very calm, very quiet. It's not a frenzy. You go to Russia, it is pandemonium. They have 10 to 12,000 people at an event, and they let them on the track for the track walk. And some of the drivers need security. They actually have bodyguards to keep the people away from them because they just envelop the driver and they rush them. And it's incredible to see that there. In the U.S., you have the same thing where they have to have stanchions and lineups.
There's this euphoria
to get people to actually get organized to get into the lineup.
Yeah, but as spectators, you can only see it. But now in Russia, you're saying that they can touch and they can...
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Russia always... I mean, it may have something to do with the vodka. I don't know. But Russia's always kicking it up notches. But
that's just a different style.
It's a different,
It's the way they
style.
do it there. In FD, we have the VIP track walk, but that's more limited, where they allow a certain amount of people out there. In Russia, they just open it up and say, "Come on in, everybody," and you've got maybe not 10,000, but definitely thousands of people rushing the track, all the cars lined up, and you can't move.
It's loosely organized, I imagine.
It's phenomenal to see, and it gives you great hope for the sport in the future, because
I mean, globally,
it's like that all around the world.
Super cool.
The fanatical level of the fans is just great.
In fact, speaking of which, you travel well over 250, 300 days a year, Super Drift Brazil, Pro Drift Peru, the Russian Drift Series we just talked about, Hyperfest, Drift Jam. How do you keep a balance?
I don't. This is
you
all.
Keep going.
This is all I do. It's what is it? January something today, and my season's just starting. My year is starting already.
Wow.
This is my first. I was in Brazil for New Year's, but that was my first flight technically. But now it's starting, and I'm not going to stop all year long.
Now, what about Sweden? You listed a bunch over there.
Sweden, Norway.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely.
What's the mentality in Europe? Europe now has Formula One is still big. They're slowly moving to electric. We've covered on some of those stories. Drift is pretty big in Europe.
It is. GATT Bill is the biggest motorsports event in Scandinavia. So GATT Bill means street car and in Norwegian. So that started out as...
Those Norwegians.
Yeah, they have very, very strict rules over there for cars on the street. So they said, why don't we do a festival on the track? And it was a bunch of friends that had started it. And it grew to be one of the biggest motorsport festivals in the world. They have concerts, they have the driving, time attack, drifting, a mix on the track. That is, to me, it looks like absolute chaos from the outside. But on the track, if you get in a car and you're out there, everything flows well. But that's another place where people go crazy. They camp all weekend. They party. It's
like a Coachella.
It is a Coachella for cars. It's phenomenal.
Well, it's like this here at the Future Collector Car Show. How many of you listening would have been to your last car show where there was a fashion
show?
I mean, it's a Lollapalooza of goodness.
It is. It's fantastic. There were great beats playing earlier. We had beautiful people walking around on the stage up there. It was very interesting to see how many people were watching that. Everybody stopped looking at the cars.
Yes,
It
I
was
noticed
packed
that.
over there. For
Yeah,
the,
what do you say? A couple hundred chairs put out there like a runway?
Yeah, and then people all
easy.
around were standing, all to watch during a car show. So I think they hit the nail on the head here with that concept, right? Getting a nice blend of two different things that you wouldn't think would go together, but they really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can fans find you, Ryan Lanteigne? Where can we send folks? Website, Instagram? Where can we send folks?
Instagram is the typical spot. I like to post a lot of things from events that I go to because that's what people want to see, behind the scenes stuff. My Instagram is Lanteigne, so it's LawnTang, the way you pronounce it essentially. I'm on Facebook, but I don't really think anybody cares about that. Instagram seems to be the place where people
Instagram is where it's
like to
at,
see
yeah.
it.
Ryan, are you going to post us on your Instagram?
Yeah, we'd love
Rent
to.
Nation. We'd love some love.
Susie's always putting our
See?
people on the spot.
I am doing that.
Well, Ryan Lanteigne, if you're out at a Formula Drift event, more than likely you will catch Ryan in the background quietly judging to keep it all fair and keep it, more importantly, open. And I love that idea of open. When you have these series and you have these levels of competition, this is the appeal to the sport, and we're honored to have you stop by.
Frank, can I say this?
Absolutely. Come on, Susie.
Ryan, I had such a pleasure meeting you today.
Oh, thank you.
Man, what a humble guy you
I
are.
appreciate you guys having me on today.
Yeah, and I think that we might as well say that speaks to the whole sport. I mean, we haven't met one person that said, hey, I got 4 publicists, you need to wait in line. and that's really cool because we are fans as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. So
Well, we do what we can to help build the sport, and not only drifting, but cars in general. I think this show is very important for the future of the collector car sport, the car modification business, let's call it. The young people today being able to do this and have an area to showcase their abilities, their talents, and their passion is important, I think, for the future. So
yeah, and their personal flair and their conviction and their
Exactly.
passion behind what they're building and bringing
Yeah.
is awesome. So thanks again. We appreciate it. And we'll follow up with you for the show in the future. Until then, enjoy.
Thank you.